Hello everyone, today I'm taking a break from my normal style of video where I rant about how awful a tribe in Polytopia is, and then try to come up with a way to make that tribe usable, and talk instead about a tribe that has a pretty long history of being in the top 3 of the most powerful tribes in the game, and I'd even go so far as to say that the only time in this game's nearly 6 years of history. 6 years? It's been so long? When Bardur was not in the top 3 tribes, it was the span of time between the release of Simanti and Balance Pass 1 when Bardur was nerfed in terms of their spawn rates, assuming I have my timeline right. However, we want to discuss the present state of Bardur, and Bardur are a very flexible tribe for the simple reason that they have a vast amount of forests and animals in the majority of their spawns together, with no impediment to other spawn rates other than farms, which they have absolutely none of whatsoever. They can also harvest these various resources without any real difficulty simply because they start the game with the hunting tech, which is not only useful in and of itself, but provides quick and easy access to forest and archery too. That being said, I do see players play Bardur in a very suboptimal way. So to correct that, I'm going to address the part of Bardur's game that I think is the most misunderstood first, the opening. Now in Polytopia, the dominant early game strategy tends to be a fairly simple strategy, which is to research free spirit and chop trees in order to provide a star boost. However, Bardur, being only a few clicks away from forestry at all times, means that they have a second way to use their many forests, namely to build lumber huts in them and fill the gaps in with sawmills for an excellent middle game economy. So which of these two strategies for using forests do I recommend then? Well, surprisingly, it's not one or the other but a combination of both, and specifically I recommend researching free spirit first and then chopping down as many trees as you can, while still leaving sufficient trees to level up your cities once more. If this last paragraph confused you, that is understandable, so let's give an example. You have a single level 2 city, surrounded by 5 forests and no exceptional circumstances whatsoever. In this case, you'll need 3 lumber huts giving 1 population each to upgrade your city to level 3, and thus should usually chop down 2 forests to give you 4 stars to work with and no more. Naturally, if you're about to build a road network, then you have no need for 3 lumber huts, and rather you will only need 2 plus the 1 population from the road and so on. In order to work with this strategy, you will undeniably need to research free spirit early on. For this purpose, I suggest that you level up your city once on turn 0, and then build a second warrior on turn 1, as not doing so will not allow you to access free spirit any faster. On turn 2, you will have 1 initial star, plus 2 from turn 1 if you chose workshop, and then a further 4 from turn 2, meaning ending your turn once more will allow you to access both riding and free spirit on turn 3 for a total of 11 stars. Once this is done, you'll now need to move on to a middle game plan, which is usually more heavily based on circumstances around you than the opening, which is fairly set. Your plans will normally revolve around expansion using riders and roads and the acquisition of forestry to level up cities with the trees you saved from earlier. You can also do as I did in the example game on screen now, and chop down trees in order to clear a pathway for your riders to move more easily around. In combat, your strategies are not complicated, and revolve mostly around using road-boosted night attacks funded by your powerful economy, although naturally you may also want to use catapults should the need arise. The situations in which catapults are useful, though, are mostly limited to situations with a fairly static enemy on whom you have vision. Essentially, don't bother with catapults against knights, riders, Simanti, or a competent Polaris player, as you'll simply be leaving your defences weak, and wasting stars on expensive units. Comparatively, tribes that often get early giants like Zabasi are excellent targets, as are the likes of Vengir and Jinji, who often use the sluggish swordsman as their powerhouse. Just be careful to use riders to mop up flankers and especially space your units apart, in order to avoid night chains. Navy is not really a massive priority for Bardur in the same way that it is for Kiku, but playing as any tribe other than maybe Simanti requires at least some knowledge of naval mechanics, so I suggest that as Bardur, you turn to starting Naval Expansion when you no longer feel that you have sufficient space to expand on land, either by virtue of having wiped out your rivals, or because you are on an island to start with. This will need to happen much faster and sometimes in the place of researching other technologies if you're playing against a rival such as Kiku on a map that contains more water, while on lakes or dry lands you might not even need to go past researching fishing for the whole game. As for the other tech branches, the climbing branch of the tech tree is not completely useless for the Bardur tribe because they have no real reductions in spawn rates. However, I would consider the philosophy branch to be almost useless for the usual reasons pertaining to Mindbenders being a fairly rubbish troop. and Smithery is also low on the priority list because of the fact that you already have access to so many other military technologies that by this point it will be unnecessary, except of course for the forges and mines. These are especially important when invading the territory of a tribe with increased mountain and or metal for spawn rate, such as Aimo, Shinji, Vengir or Semanti. Conversely, when you're invading a tribe such as Semanti with farms, you may want to consider researching the otherwise unused farming and construction techs, if of course they haven't already farmed all of their farms and built the windmill everywhere. Finally, let us address tribe matchups. Bardur is a singularly strong tribe, so attacking other tribes is always an option to be considered, although you are not by any means obliged to do so either. Your early game warriors will need to be used to kill any polytaurs that may stray into your lands, as is the case with riders, as riders in the middle game will die in only a single hit to polytaurs, but otherwise you should have little to no fear from other tribe rushes, except perhaps for Vengir, who will inevitably pose problems before around turn 5. After that, though the game is yours, bear in mind to move towards resources where possible to find villages, and then you'll only really need to turn your attention to other late game tribes. Kiku are of course a serious threat on the water, however measured aggression in the form of a rider attack can seriously damage Kiku's fleets if you catch them at exactly the right moment, when they are investing in sailing and have just embarked into boats. This is of course difficult to do without explorers, who will allow you to get the timing right. Semanti I have already discussed, but essentially you should neglect catapults and anything that suffers from poison, read defenders, against Semanti, and instead focus on riders, roads, and then later on knights, to one-up their hexapods and kill their shaman. Their larger units are easily picked off by knights once you have them on the back foot. Polaris obviously demand a specific strategy, but in this case I haven't really got much to say except for what is hopefully obvious. Attack them as quickly as possible, and stay out of freezing range with giants. In this manner, you should have no problems against 90% of the Polaris player base, and the remaining 10% you should have decent chances against. So there you have it then, Bardur in a nutshell. A simple tribe really, but very enjoyable and a flexible one, that should be more than capable of serving you well, regardless of game mode or opponent. The video's been a little bit shorter today because ultimately they're just such a strong tribe that there's not really an awful lot to say about them. That's all from me then, goodbye.